Hey guys, I'm so glad you're back, and I'm glad that I'm finally feeling better. Still a little gunky, but for the most part, I have survived influenza A, and I'm so happy. I feel so much better. So I am happy to be back with you in my voice and sharing with you today 3 myths about student behavior. So, when you believe myths about behavior, you could have misguided approaches, which of course doesn't align with helping your students grow. And so, we're going to explore these myths and uncover some practical strategies for positive change for your students' behavior. So, listen in today, guys, as we explore these 3 myths about behavior. Welcome to Behavior Strategies for Class. I am Diane Bachman, your behavior paraprofessional with over 15 years of experience working in special education. And I'm so glad you're here because I'll be teaching you about social emotional learning, behavior strategies, trauma-informed care, and more. So if you are tired of being frustrated and not knowing what to do with your students who have challenging and disruptive behavior, you're in the right place. Now, if you're ready to become more equipped to help your students learn and grow, let's listen in to today's episode. But of course, before we get started, please hit that subscribe button, share this episode, share this podcast with other amazing educators that you know so that we can continue to grow and learn from each other. So, 3 myths about behaviors. 1, I'm just using he as just an example. It's not necessarily just one specific, only boys, because we know there are plenty of girls that have lovely, challenging behaviors just as well. So anyways, number 1 is he'll never change. Like that student is never going to change. He gets passed from grade level to grade level and everybody has the same thoughts. And so he's kind of a lost cause. But he's never going to change. That is a myth because students can change all the time. Now, there has to be a foundation to help that student change. Obviously, when a student is struggling in behavior, there are reasons why. Because again, behavior is communication. And when they can't communicate all of the emotions and regulate themselves with what is going on in their life, it comes out in this challenging behavior that affects you and your classroom. So what can you do about it? Obviously, we cannot control what happens at home. As soon as your students leave the school for the day, you have no control over what is happening. Whether they're eating dinner that night, whether they're sleeping in their car or they're sleeping in a hotel, or their parents are fighting all night, or, mom or dad might be sick and fighting cancer and so they can't spend any time with them, or whatever it is. Those are all factors you can't control. But what you can control is when that student comes into your room. How do you want them to feel? How do you make them feel? Do you hold them to their expectations? Do they know the clear expectations? Do they know that you care about them? I know there are some educators who are like, I love my kids, and then I know some that are like, I don't love them. But you can care about them. And that is genuine, and you show that by the way you listen to them and the way you talk to them. Do they feel that? And just with anything, this is even academics, your students are not going to learn and grow in math overnight. And they're not going to start reading at grade level when they came in 2 levels below overnight. It takes time. It takes practice. And that is what we have to remember. It's the same with behavior. We feel like, okay, well, we gave them instruction. We talked about this behavior last week. Like, why are we still dealing with this? I hear that a lot. And that's because they're students and they are learning. This is a practice that they will continue their whole life. So they can change. But consistency, expectations, care, and having that connection with your students makes a difference. It's so funny because I remember overhearing a couple of teachers talking and, kind of like, okay, yeah, I started connecting or talking with one of my students that was challenging, have some disruptive behaviors. And sure enough, like that student has turned their behaviors around. They're really trying now and focusing better. And granted, it's not perfect, but they already saw the fruits of taking time with that student, even though, they're kind of like rolling their eyes, oh yeah, we have to have a relationship with our kids and blah, 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 like they were not totally into it, but they still saw the positive impact that they made when they put in that effort to be able to connect with that student. So it really does not take a lot for you to just take a minute and ask how they're doing. Because the more consistent you are, the more you hold them to the expectations, their behaviors will begin to change. And sometimes that may just be with you. We have some students when they're in, like a specials class with a different teacher, their behaviors kind of act up because they don't really have that connection with that teacher, and they don't really want to be there. The teacher doesn't really care if they're there, and so those behaviors kind of, come out and are disruptive. Where instead, when they're in your class, like they feel your care for them and they do their best not to have that disruptive behavior while they're with you. So they can change. That is a total myth that they can never change. So number 2 myth is he's just a bad kid. He's just a bad kid. Unfortunately, I've heard this more than once throughout my, almost 18 years now that I've been working in special education. And this is, and I've been in elementary schools. I subbed once in middle school, got my hair pulled, and was with a student who was like head taller than me. And I was like, oh yeah, no, middle school is not for me because I am not very tall. And so most of those kids are way bigger than me. Anyways, I digress to say my special education experience has been in elementary school. And I have heard, unfortunately, a lot of educators, when they get, certain students, like, oh, he's just a bad kid. And they just kind of, like I said before, they just kind of shuffle him off. He's a bad kid. Like, watch out for him. He's this, he's this, he's that. And it is such a bummer because that kid is already set up for failure. Because we know, like we get those students and we're like, oh, okay. And I'm not saying, like, you should have some background about your students. Hopefully you're able to get some of that information, especially at the beginning of the year. And then even now, you're still getting new students throughout the year. You get new students all the time. And so what is their reputation? Just like all of us, most of us, our reputation precedes us. And especially if that student has been at your school for 3 or 4 years, mostly everybody knows about that student. It's that student with quotes. And so nobody really puts in the effort because it's like, well, he's had all this behavior this whole time. So what's the big deal? Like, what am I going to do that's going to be different? Well, you can make a difference. One of the best things that I worked with my last admin when we worked with behavior in a different program was, yes, we would get new students and we'd get their IEP. We'd look at their behavior plan, and then we would look at their behavior incidents. And sometimes we have maybe 5 to 10 of them in behavior incidents. We have gotten students that have like a plethora of them, like over 30 incidents. And this could be within like 2 months. That's a lot. And sometimes they could be anywhere from, hitting the teacher, kicking, biting, running, eloping out of the school, all of these things. And one thing I learned from that admin was like, okay, well, he's at a new school now. So yes, we know about these behaviors, but this is a new beginning. We're not going to treat him any different. So when he comes in, we're not going to be like, oh my gosh, like put everything in lockdown, like, don't turn your back on this kid, all of these things. No, we're going to treat him just like everybody else, welcome him in, and it's a new slate and we are starting over. That's huge. And granted, those students don't know that. But it made such a difference for us in the way that we were able to connect with them and work with them, because we didn't hold that over his head. Like, oh yeah, man, I know what you did. But at the same time, it gave us that information and that background so that we are still aware that he could have these behaviors, but we don't throw that on him and like, okay, well, you're automatically a bad kid because you have this whole rap sheet. And granted, I want to tell you, I've never counted, but a lot of those students, when they came to our school and worked with us, they had a fraction of those behaviors at our school. Because even though most of these students are special education students, even though you're in special education, you're not always specifically trained on how to help with behaviors. And so that was the awesome part when I switched from working in a special needs class to working in a behavior program, is learning more about their behaviors and being able to come alongside these students when they're escalated and they're having a problem. And not everybody knows how to do that. And so we were able to learn, like, he's not a bad kid. Again, you could probably go back and see, like, we had students, dad was in jail, he was in a gang. We've had a student whose dad was in a cult and used to beat up his kids. We had students in the foster care system that had switched homes like 2 or 3 times within the year, and their behaviors escalated. We've had other students that we found out had mental health issues, and so their behaviors were a little bit different and escalated. I mean, we had another student who was afraid to be outside because bio parents had threatened to come get her, and she was not supposed to be with bio parents. I mean, so many different things, again, factor in to your students' behavior. So even though they can be labeled a bad kid, you really have to think about why. Again, what happened to that student? And also, if that student comes into your school, it's like, okay, this is a new school, a new year. You have a clean slate, and treat that student just the same as the rest of your students. And you will see that student flourish. I promise you. You will see a huge difference if we don't label them. Oh man, there's that kid. And I'm right there with you. I have definitely been guilty of doing that and saying like, oh man, like, dude, do not put me with that kid. And ultimately, of course, I do. Am working with that student. But we can't label. That's a myth. He's just a bad kid. That's a myth. So number 3 myth, the third myth, is their behavior is on purpose. Like they intentionally woke up that day and was like, I am going to make my teacher so mad today. I am going to interrupt her like constantly. I'm going to kick my, neighbor that I sit next to in class. I'm going to, throw my paper across the room. Guys, this is so one thing that I was taught. Like, they do not do that. Because again, behavior is communication. So when they, again, are overwhelmed with this emotion of whatever it is that is happening inside because of all of the different experiences and things that are happening to them, that they have no control over, they have no emotional regulation. And so whatever happens throughout the day hits them at just the right moment that they need an explosion. They need a release. And if we're not able to catch that, it comes out in a lot of different ways. Like I said, eloping, running out of your room, running out of the school, fighting, the disrespect, all of those things are emotional dysregulation. And so they don't think about those things, like I said, when they wake up in the morning and like, okay, I'm ready to like take out whoever it is that comes at me. Granted, there's probably always one, right? There's probably always one that may be actually thinking that. But majority of your students are not thinking that. So their misbehavior, their disruption, their challenging behavior is not on purpose. That is a myth. Because it's their emotional dysregulation that erupts that they're not thinking about because they don't know how to control it. And so it's not on purpose. Like they're really not out to get you. Granted, again, I'm in elementary school, and I'm sure things are probably different in middle school and high school. That's like a whole nother level. But in elementary school, they really are not waking up and like, I'm going to make a disaster today. And I'm just going to make all, admin pissed off and make my teacher mad at me. And I don't know. So these are myths. These are so not true. You are a difference maker. You are changing lives every single day by showing up and being there for your students. So again, the 3 myths are: 1, he'll never change. 2, he's just a bad kid. 3, his misbehavior's on purpose. These are so not true. One of the other important things that I learned, that I was taught in some of my behavior training, was do not take your students' behavior personally. You, unfortunately, sometimes are just the person in the wrong place in the wrong time. Or normally they're with you majority, 7 hours a day. So, of course, it's coming out at you. And so it's not personal, but you're just the adult there at that moment. And so what has helped me, what is my coworkers, and being able to vent with them and be like, can you believe he said this to me? Can you believe that she did this? Can you believe this just happened? And then we can release it and laugh and joke, and then we're done with it. It's over and done. And now you're working with that student again. So do not take their behavior personally. Now, which myth were you believing? And which belief have you changed and are ready to have a different approach for that student? Because I know it's very easy to label your students, especially, like I said, when you get 30, 40, behavior incidents and you're just like, oh my word, now this student is coming here. We have to give that student a new chance because they can change. They are not bad kids. Their misbehavior is not on purpose. So again, which belief have you changed? Or will you change? All right, guys, you're amazing. You're doing awesome. Hopefully, you'll be coming up for spring break soon and you'll be enjoying yourself, relaxing, hopefully, with your family and friends, and just getting some refreshment because you deserve it. All right, guys, I'll see you next week. Thanks so much for listening. I truly appreciate your support. And if I have encouraged you, motivated you to continue to learn, to support your students, even better, to help them strive in your classroom, please leave a review, hit that subscribe button so that others can see they can learn and grow here as well. Thank you.